Okay, so I don't want to annotate this poem, but I have to, so I thought, may as well make a video out of it, because why not? It's my channel, I can do what I want with it. So first, a materials list. This is a completely pointless section, it's just me procrastinating starting, because I don't want to, okay. Obviously, you want a pencil. You want a pencil, you want an eraser. This is a kneadable eraser, which is it's an eraser that is kneadable. I've got a blue pen, I've got a black pen, and I have a red pen. Each of these do a different thing. The blue pen is all about sort of meaning and whatnot. This is all about technique and sort of like what we're doing with it. Can I get that light better? Sorry, moving the light. There we go. This is all about technique and whatnot. You know, like, oh, that was alliteration. And this is all about really general stuff. And then this is just for notes. Okay. Oh, and also, most importantly, a protractor, which I'm using as a straight edge, so I can make little underlines. That's what I use to annotate every poem. Now, the first step is to read the poem. So let's read the poem. Move him into the sun. Gently its touch awoke him once. At home, whispering of fields unsown, always it woke him, even in France. Until this morning and the snow, if anything might rouse him now, the kind old sun will know. Think how it wakes the seeds. Woke once the clays of a cold star. Our limbs, so dear achieved our sides, full nerved, still warm, too hard to stir. Was it for the clay grew tall? Was it for this the clay grew tall? Oh, what made fatuous sunbeams toil to break earth's sleep at all? So the first thing that we need to write down is, I'm actually going to write that in my lower section. So here I have a whole bunch of paper, because this is a tiny little poem. I'm going to write, this poem suffers from poem vagitis. Effectively, it's so vague that any and all interpretation is pretty much left up to the audience, which is a terrible idea because the audience tends to be dumb and they come up with really silly interpretations. But anyways, now let's pay attention to the title, which is futility. So that gives us a little bit of context. That gives us context, which is that there is something involving futility. So something is futile here that we're doing, you know. And okay, so now let's try to break this down into basis, development or fermentation, and conclusion or reveal. So firstly, let's try to find the basis. So here, obviously this is the start of the basis, and the end should be around about this line. However, I don't think it's there. Let's see, gently a touch awoke him once. So we have the idea of the sun waking up. At home, it always woke him even in France. So we have sun waking up, context of war. Okay. And I think that, yeah, this here is our basis. So that there, the basis sets up everything. So what the basis does is it tells the entire story in a very short, sort of undeveloped way. And the development or fermentation's job, and those two things are different, is to take the basis and turn it into either the conclusion or set up for the reveal. So here, this is this, we have the transitionary period here, so that's the transition. And that moves us from the basis into the development fermentation. So here, the development, so if this is the basis, then this should be our reveal and sort of, or conclusion. So we know that the development starts around about here, kind of within the transitionary period. If anything might rise some now. So we have that, yeah, so I'd say this is a development, not a fermentation. The difference being a development is active and a fermentation is passive. So a fermentation just takes this and sort of moves it forward very slowly in a logical step. The development actually adds a little bit of new information and kind of pushes it forward a little bit more. It kind of has a bit more pep in its step. It's a lot faster. So here we have until morning in the slow. So we need to move it. So if we're assuming this is our conclusion, because this is a conclusion, not a reveal, then we need to identify sort of the area where it becomes, this is full, nerve still warm, too hard to stir. Was it for this the clay grew tall? Oh, what made fat? So I would say this is the end of the, and this here is a development. So I'm going to write development there. And then this here is a conclusion, and this is a conclusion, not a reveal. There we go. And it's a conclusion because it takes where the development has it takes the basis and it wraps it up with a nice little bow. The reveal actually adds some more information usually, or what it does is it takes this information and it takes it in an unexpected direction. They tend to be a lot shorter and they tend to sort of surprise the audience in some way. But this is just the conclusion of the basis. So it's a conclusion, not a reveal. So here we have our structure and we can sort of look at how it's laid out. And I would say pacing is good. Pacing gets a tick from me. So I'm going to write pacing. Actually write that in the black pen. Pacing is good. There we go. So that's under the structure category. So if you need to talk about structure, you can always rely on basis, development, conclusion for your pacing information. Now we need to talk about what each sort of brings to the table. So the basis introduces the motif of the sun and the awakening, and then gives sort of context for the reliability of the awakening. So I'm going to put a little 1 up by the basis, and then down here I'm going to write introduces sun, awakening, there we go. Now the development, what does the development bring? So we'll move that down so it's easier to see. We've got until this morning in the snow, so we have the introduction of the idea that this is an exception. Anything might rouse him now, the old sun will know. We have desperation. Think how it wakes the seeds. So then again we have development of the reliability of the awakening. So this is related to this line here, so we can actually write that down later. Our limbs so dear achieved, our sides full, nerves still warm, too hard to stir, and it gives us context for the, I'm assuming, soldiers' situations, their sort of bodily situation. So here we have 2, until this instance, as an exception to the rules in 1. Adds tone we want to use that word tone. I really like that word tone in essays. Adds tone of desperation. And what I actually want to do is, and obviously we're going to break down that tone of desperation eventually. I'm going to get to it. This is boring. This is adds tone of desperation. That's there. It reinforces. This is the reliability of sun-based awakening from 1. Okay, so it does that. Then gives context for soldier. Well, we don't know, because it's so vague. It's open to interpretation. I assume it is a soldier. That's a contextual thing, but the thing is, if a poem makes you go outside of the poem in order to understand the poem, it has fundamentally failed. So, for the person's bodily situation, since physical state, physical. Say, ideally these notes would be like, just rip them and stick them into an essay. Okay, and then finally, 3, which is the conclusion. So obviously we want to use the word concludes. Concludes basis. That's quite important. What else does it do? It reflects on futility. There we go. We snuck that word in, futility, from the title. You want to do that, right? If you can sneak the title in, if you can sneak words in, then they'll grade you better, because they'll think you're smart when really you're just, just ticking check boxes. So there we go. Reflects on futility of, what is this? The sun's wakiness. That's a terrible line to stick into an essay, but I can't be bothered right now. So now what we need to do is I'm actually going to put a question mark by here, because what we're going to do is we're going to go over the three movements of sort of pacing, which is the basis, development, fermentation, conclusion, reveal. So here we have basis, development, conclusion, and actually see, does it contain the information that it needs? So the basis needs to include all the information needed throughout the piece, all the major information. So really, what you need to be able to do is, if I cut out the development and part of that transition that's within the development, so if I cut out the development here, so if I cover it, does the poem still make some sense? It should be a worse poem, but it should still make some sense. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to read just the basis, I'm going to stop at the development, and then I'm going to read the conclusion. And if it makes logical sense, then the basis includes enough information, the bare minimum information. So, move him into the sun, gently its touch awoke him once. At home, whispering of fields unsown, always it woke him, even in France. What is for this the clay grew tall? Oh, what made fatuous sunbeams toil to break earth's sleep at all? Now, I would say, obviously this here, I'd actually argue that that's probably part of a second transition between the development and the conclusion. So this, if I just ignore that line, it would make sense if it was intended to be read from the basis to the conclusion. but it's not, there's a development here. So this is talking about a line from the development. So that's kind of okay. Oh, what made the fatuous sunbeams toil to break earth sleep at all? It makes a decent amount of sense. It's not great. It could be better. The basis could definitely be better, could, you know, be a little bit more. But we have this development here. So the development is the meteor section. So obviously we've already, we've achieved that. It's the meteor section. And what it does is it takes it in the logical next direction. So it takes the basis and it evolves it, and then by the end of the development, the next step is the conclusion. So here what we've got is we take this, and this is definitely a logical progression. We move to, oh, but this is an exception to the rule. If anything might rouse him now, the old kind son will know. So we add that desperation, which is contextualizing that. So again, somewhat of a logical step. I would say it's a little bit backwards and put it the other way around, maybe. Think how it wakes the seeds, woke once the clays of a cold star. That's just nonsense. Our limbs so dared achieved our sides, full nerve, still warm, too hard to stir. I would say the development is okay. It does introduce some elements that I think should have been set up in the basis instead of in the development. So, you know, it's okay. Now the conclusion takes all of the stuff in the basis and resolves it, and I would say that this is a pretty okay conclusion. The only thing that it hasn't really concluded well is the fate of the person, what's going on, because we know that they're in some form of physical injury, and I'm assuming this is some metaphor for death or something resembling that. So what is their fate? That has not been resolved. So I'd say pacing wise, I'm gonna give it a sad face, and that gives me all the information I need. Content wise, again, content is linked to this. Content is linked to pacing. I'm also going to give that a sad face. Right, now that we've done that, we've broken down the three main structural elements. I'm also just going to label the two stanzas. So stanza 1, actually I'm not going to do it like that. I'm going to do it in a square, in a little box. Stanza 1 and stanza 2. Yeah. Not really necessary for this one, but it is a good habit to get into. So now what we're going to do is we're going to bring out the mighty red pen, and we're going to look at some techniques, right? And this bit is really easy. So here we go. Move them into the sun. So make that little dot, and then here, that's an imperative. And we're not going to add much sort of what does it mean, because that's what the blue pen is for. Gently its touch awoke him once. That is imagery. So there we go. 2, that's imagery. And I'm going to take my pencil and I'm just going to draw my little symbol for imagery there. That is an eye. It's just little at home whispering of fields unsown. At home whispering of fields unsown. Okay, whispering of fields unsown. That is sound. What is that? It's word painting. Because we have these sibilants. Always it woke him even in France. Always it woke him. Okay, that's a matter of. I'll get back to until this morning and the snow. What is that? No, nothing to really comment on here. Anything might rouse him now. The kind old sun will know. So that there's personification. Kind old sun. That is what for personification. No. Think how it wakes the seeds, woke once the clays of a cold star, clays of a cold... Not really. Our limbs so dear achieved our sides, full nerve still warm, too hard to stir. So this is imagery again. I'm going to put that into 2 and add a little eye. This is really not complicated poem at all. Was it for this the clay grew tall? Oh, what made fatuous sunbeams toil to break earth's sleep at all? So this is a reflection. Add 5, and this is reflection, and of course I'm not taking this seriously at all. All right, now we bring out the blue pen, which is, what does it mean? Okay, until this morning in the snow, so here I'm gonna write down. Oh great, is my blue pen broken? There we go. Until this morning in the snow. Here we go. 1. This is an exception. I.e. Oh, you can't actually see what I'm writing. I.e. death, because we know that everything means death with Cambridge. If anything might rouse him now, the kind old sun will know. If anything might rouse him now, that is 2. That is a disparate tone. Disparate tone. Move him into the sun. Oh, wonderful. I'm gonna lift the awful setup that I have here that allows for that. Move him into the sun. I'm gonna do this as well and just add that 2 there. Think how it wakes the seeds, woke once the clays of a cold star. Our limbs so dear achieved our sides, full of nerves, so this gives context. That's 3. Text. 4. Fizz. There. Oh, you can't see what I'm writing. Cool. State. And achieve. That's cool. Full nerve still warm, too hard to stir. Was it for this the clay grew tall? For this the clay grew tall? That's almost a pathetic fallacy. Oh, what made fatuous sunbeams toil to break earth's sleep at all? This is pathetic fallacy. That's actually a technique, so I'll just put that under 6. Pathetic fallacy. And there we go. I've annotated it as much as I can be bothered. This is, this is the limit of what I can take. There are other things that need to be mentioned. Let's see, tone has been mentioned. Structure has been mentioned. Content, context has been mentioned. Genre needs to be mentioned, but I can't be bothered. Genre is really stupid to mention with this. Like, what genre is it? I don't care. It's vague. It's vaguerama. It's boring old vague poetry that... Oh, yeah. Form, genre... Yeah, that's pretty much everything.